The anti-inflammatory diet for beginners is one of my favorite things to talk about, but it can also be a frustrating thing to talk about. And I'm going to explain why that is and give you, number one, the main goals of an anti-inflammatory diet. Number two, the basic guidelines of this dietary framework. Number three, how you can get started on an anti-inflammatory diet, including a free quick start guide. And last, what you can expect when starting an anti-inflammatory diet. Hey, it's Laura with TrueWell, and the anti-inflammatory diet may just be the buzziest dietary style of the year right now. It's gotten a lot of attention and a lot of people want to get started on it. Some people are really trying to get started with weight loss. Some are trying to manage a condition, and others have a condition that they're actually just trying to avoid and just want to really be healthy. So first and foremost, I'm actually running a poll on this because I'm interested in the different reasons for you being interested in an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle. So comment below and let me know what your reason is for being interested in an anti-inflammatory diet in the first place. Now, like I said before, this is one of my favorite things to talk about because probably a decade's worth of studies have shown that this type of dietary framework can not only help manage chronic conditions, but can also prevent them, meaning this type of eating style can benefit nearly everyone on the planet. The reason that it frustrates me is that there is a lot of misinformation out there from well-meaning health bloggers, but they're actually putting information and food lists out that aren't backed up by studies. And this is frustrating because so many people read these and then use them and end up restricting themselves from foods that weren't even inflammatory and could also have been giving them some added nutrients. Plus, the more restrictive your dietary style, the harder it can be to keep up. So, to get to the bottom of this, let's talk about what inflammation is in the first place because there are actually two different types. Okay, so inflammation is an immune response that the body creates. The first type is an acute response, which is your body reacting to an injury, a cut, a virus, a bacteria. This is your body doing its job to protect you from whatever that threat is. Second type of inflammation comes when you consistently have poor lifestyle choices like smoking, drinking too much, or eating a typical Western diet. This creates an environment in the body where your blood sugar is constantly spiking and staying too high. You gain body fat, you're eating and drinking foods with ultra processed ingredients that cause inflammation. You're not sleeping well and constantly stressed, which throws your hormones out of whack. And then they put those fight or flight hormones on priority, which causes even more inflammation. And then this body weight creates this vicious cycle of producing inflammatory enzymes that raise blood sugar. Then blood sugar causes more inflammation and the cycle continues. This is chronic inflammation, and it just happens on a nonstop basis with those types of dietary and lifestyle choices. And this is really where the large majority of people are and why we're seeing these staggering statistics and large numbers of people that now have chronic conditions like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, among others, because chronic inflammation leads to those chronic conditions. And this is where an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle come into play. Foods with anti-inflammatory properties like polyphenols can be really potent antioxidants, which not only prevent low-grade inflammation, but also slow down aging, keep weight under control, and help you have natural energy every day. So let's go through what the main goals are in an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle. Number one is going to be taking out the inflammatory foods. So sugar, refined carbs like flour and flour-based foods, trans fats, and oxidated fats are the most important foods to eliminate that we know are inflammatory in the body. Cutting out ultra processed foods will be the easiest first step in shifting into an anti-inflammatory diet. This is because these foods usually contain unhealthful fats, refined carbs, and sugars, little to no fiber, and a lot of artificial preservatives and artificial colorings. All of these things are pro inflammatory. So the more processed it is, the more you need to stay away from it. Now, there are a lot of lists of foods that say that they are inflammatory floating around that include things like nightshades, dairy, legumes, and more. And what I like to tell you on this is that there isn't any conclusive evidence that these foods are inherently inflammatory. Some of those foods have been shown to cause inflammation with certain conditions and for certain people. In addition to that, every single person's body is different. So the only way to truly know if a food is inflammatory to your body is to do an elimination diet. This is part of the process of creating a truly unique anti-inflammatory diet for you. Now, we have a quick start guide that I mentioned before, so don't forget to check that out in the description to dive even deeper into this. Now, the second goal is going to be increasing nutrient rich foods that heal and nourish. And this means making a really big effort to increase these nutrient dense foods. These are your healthy and quality proteins, healthy fats, mainly a ton of plant based foods. This is because of the fiber resistant starches, which both are prebiotics and help feed the healthy gut bacteria, and then your vegetables and fruits because they're also dense in vitamins, minerals, and polyphenols. Increasing these types of foods makes it so much easier for your body to do its job of keeping your system running in order. Okay, so the third goal is going to be managing blood sugar. Since blood sugar spikes or hyperglycemia are also inflammatory in the body and can also contribute to weight gain, sugar and refined carbs are one of the first things to go. Now, when we talk about going sugar free, a lot of people are just like, no, I can't even imagine a world where I can't have sweets and I can't eat this and I can't eat that. I want to emphasize here that we're talking about quitting sugar, not specifically sweets. There is a healthy way to have sweets that won't impact your blood sugar in this way. We just figure out a different way to accomplish having sweets without them including sugar and refined carbs. The reason that it may be so hard for you to quit that is because sugar and refined carbs trigger neurotransmitters in the brain that create a habit cycle or reward cycle, and for a lot of people, this turns into emotional eating. Anything attached to emotions in this way is going to be a challenge, but it's not impossible, I promise. If this is a problem for you, you're not alone. 50% of the women that I've surveyed said that this is the number one setback for them sticking to an anti inflammatory diet. So, if you'd like more information on that, check out the description below. Goal number four is going to be boosting foods that are shown to help reduce further inflammation. So these are going to be the list of foods that you see that include turmeric, ginger, blueberries, and tart cherries, among others. There are foods that can help your body get rebalanced by reducing some of that inflammation. But keep in mind that if you aren't already taking out the foods that are inflammatory, it's basically the same thing as trying to brush your teeth while eating an Oreo. So let that image swim around for a minute. Okay, so the number five goal is going to be weight loss. So being overweight can in itself create inflammatory markers in the body. And then that inflammation is helping to hold on to body fat. Then that body fat is doing two things. It's sending out more inflammatory markers and it's creating insulin resistance. So it truly is a very vicious cycle. So weight loss is recommended if you're overweight or obese, and probably recommended if those are combined with other chronic conditions. What we're seeing is that in studies when it comes to food, supplements, and even medications, there is a different response in the body if you are overweight or obese versus not. So just in and of itself, losing weight is going to help bring that inflammation down at the same time. Now, the next goal is going to be adding in lifestyle factors that can really turbocharge all those other efforts that we've been talking about. Now, in my practice, I teach clients that there are four pillars of health, and we call them the core four. And the word core is an acronym for chong, oscillate, rest, and eat. And if you're putting in the effort to change your dietary patterns, incorporating the other three of the four pillars can actually help turbocharge all those other efforts because they all work together, either for or against you. So, if you're also putting in the effort to get quality and enough sleep, getting in daily movement, and managing stress, it's sort of like adding fuel to the fire of those positive changes that you're already making with your food, and you will feel the difference. Now, before we get into the guidelines of an anti inflammatory diet, if you're getting value out of this video, please hit that like button so that it lets others looking for how to start an anti inflammatory diet to find it easier, and subscribe to TrueWell for all things anti inflammatory diet and lifestyle. Okay, so let's get into the bulk of how to start an anti inflammatory diet and the guidelines. So, most basic guidelines that I encourage starting out with are the Mediterranean diet guidelines. This is because it's the least restrictive of anti inflammatory diet frameworks, but gives a really solid whole food baseline to shift into when getting started. I walk my clients through a process called the cheat codes, which is another acronym, but stands for clean eating, which is cutting the sugar, refined carbs, and unhealthy fats and proteins and shifting into whole foods. How to eat, which is going through the steps to figure out the perfect dietary style for your unique needs, which could include an elimination diet. Execute daily with meal planning, because this underrated tool is the most effective for helping you create those new habits and sustain them. Automate, which is creating systems to make all those steps effortless. And then turbocharge and thrive, which is adding in the other three of the core four that we just talked about to really get the most out of all of your efforts so that you're truly thriving. But we have to start with shifting into that basic whole food Mediterranean diet framework first. So let's break down the guidelines according to macros. And just so you know, if there is any one food that you're curious about, drop me a question in the comments. And we also have an anti-inflammatory diet 101 playlist on this channel that covers a lot of those as well. Okay, so starting out with protein. So the basics of the Mediterranean diet encourages a shift away from more red meat and into more white meat and fish and plant-based protein sources. But it also dictates quality sources because in animal-based proteins, animals that are farmed and from feedlots have been shown to cause inflammation. So you want to find quality sources that are wild caught for fish and organic and free range for poultry and white meats. For plant based protein sources, those need to be organic. Non organic plant based proteins are heavily sprayed with glyphosate and other chemicals that have been proven to cause cancer, birth defects, and other inflammatory responses in the body. Now, when it comes to red meats, I know there's a lot of controversy on whether red meat is inflammatory or not, but studies are showing that organic and grass fed beef has a different ratio of omega 6 and 3s in it. And it can actually have no effect on inflammation versus feedlot beef having a really high inflammatory effect. And again, there are certain conditions that you just really don't need to eat red meat at all. But if you are just like diehard set on still having red meat, make sure that it is organic and grass fed. Otherwise, I would push really to reduce or eliminate red meat from your diet and focus more on fish, eggs, white meat, and seafood. And if you like or can tolerate soy, that's another good source of protein from plants, and also beans and legumes, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in just a minute when we get into carbohydrates. Okay, so when we talk about fats for the Mediterranean diet, we know that in the 60s and 70s, the sugar industry funded a study to misdirect people into thinking that fats are terrible, they make us fat, and they cause heart disease. And since then, we've learned that that's not true, but that there is a difference between types of fats and quality of fats. The fats that are recommended on the Mediterranean diet move towards monounsaturated and omega 3 polyunsaturated fats, and then try to move us more away from saturated fats, omega 6, oxidated fats, and trans fats. So, when we talk, first of all, about saturated fats, what I just covered with red meats, that applies because that's mainly where the saturated fat comes from. So, quality is important because non organic and feedlot animals have a much higher ratio of inflammatory fats. Coconut oil, however, is mostly saturated fat and it's a little bit of a different story. What has been found in studies is that the virgin unrefined actually has antioxidant and anti inflammatory properties to it, whereas the refined is so refined that it loses all of that property and then it's just an ultra refined saturated fat. So, if you're going to use coconut oil, maybe because you're following a paleo framework or you just like it and want to make sure that you're getting those anti inflammatory benefits, stick with organic, unrefined coconut oil. In terms of monounsaturated fats, those are pretty much all going to be good for you. They've been shown to help prevent heart disease and they pull down inflammation in general in your body. Those are found in olives and avocados and in nuts like almonds and cashews. And then in the polyunsaturated fats, these are where we come in with our omega 3 and omega 6 ratios that we need to balance out. This is because omega 6 is more inflammatory, but it's meant to help the inflammation process when we're sick or injured. What's happening is that the ratio of omega 6 from ultra processed foods is so high to the omega 3 ratio, which is the fat that helps pull down inflammation, that those ratios are severely unbalanced for most people. So the omega 3s are the ones that we're going to find in things like walnuts and cold water wild caught fish. Another point on this is that lately we've heard a ton of information about how we need to increase those omega 3 fats so much, but there's also research that that's not quite accurate. What the research is saying is that we actually just need to have less omega 6 to balance that ratio. There's also research that overload of all polyunsaturated fats is what's a huge driver for insulin resistance. And I think that that maybe needs more research, but for now, we know that these ratios are a problem. So overall, we just need to shift the ratios of what our fats are in terms of how we cook and what we add to our foods. And that really comes down to being able to control what's going into your food. And the easiest way to do that is to cook more or learn to cook in general and eat as whole foods as possible to eliminate those ultra refined or ultra processed foods because the super refined, oxidated omega 6 and trans fats are the fats that are going to be in those ultra processed foods. Okay, so let's move into the carbohydrates category. This is a big one as well because so much messaging is out there that low carb to keto is the way to go for weight loss and health, and also with insulin resistance. But carbohydrates do have a place in an anti inflammatory diet as long as you have the right carbs. Your body needs these nutrients and the fiber and resistant starches for your gut bacteria and all of your bodily systems to function like they're supposed to. So, when we talk about carbohydrates, again, the first thing we want to eliminate is sugar and refined carbs. So, I'm going to have an entire video on sugar, probably a whole playlist, because it can be very complicated to eliminate sugar. But if you have anything packaged, then absolutely make sure that there's no sugar on that label. This should be shown in the ingredients, but there are a lot of words that they can use to disguise it. So, learning to read food labels gets really important. Refined carbs are flours, mostly from grains, and your body will treat refined grains the same way that it treats sugar. You'll have a really high blood sugar spike and then subsequent crash. And those high levels of blood sugars have been shown to increase inflammation in the body as well as disrupt your gut bacteria. The Mediterranean guidelines dictate that whole grains means truly whole or just partially cracked, not ground down into flour. So think about it this way. If you put granulated sugar into a glass of water and then also put a jawbreaker with the same amount of sugar into a glass of water as well and stirred, which one would dissolve faster? Sugar, because it's already all broken down. This is the same difference in how the body absorbs the starches that convert to sugars from flour versus truly whole grains into the bloodstream. And so this is why it's so frustrating to me to see these anti-inflammatory diet cookbooks that use regular bread and pasta and recipes where you ground oats and other grains down into flour. You're defeating the purpose of those goals of reducing inflammation when you use foods in that way because of the blood sugars. That being said, the Mediterranean diet dictates a huge boost in fiber-rich foods. So, in addition to those truly whole or just perfectly cracked grains, like quinoa, steel cut oats, couscous, buckwheat, bulgur, farro, freekeh, millet, brown rice, and spelt, just some examples. We also want to focus on increasing our vegetables, beans, lentils, and fruits. Beans and lentils are packed with fiber, protein, and resistant starches and are amazing for helping us feel full for longer. They feed our good gut bacteria and they give us sustained energy. Vegetables and fruits are packed with fiber, resistant starches, and polyphenols, which are masters at reducing free radicals in the body. The fiber and resistant starches help balance out the blood sugar response and feed our good gut bacteria as well. They also bind to fatty acids, decreasing synthesis of fats in the liver, which has been shown to help lower cholesterol and triglycerides. Balancing your blood sugar and feeding good gut bacteria with these types of foods has also been shown to help lift depression and anxiety since a majority of the neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. When you fill your plate with fiber rich foods, you're giving your body the best chance to be nourished, to run properly, reduce those chronic condition risks, and feel amazing every day. Okay, so let's talk about alcohol. Mediterranean diet guidelines state that red wine in moderation is okay, but alcohol is a bit tricky because, as with the other foods in an anti inflammatory diet, this can depend on the type and the amount of alcohol. So, drinks that have sugar, like cocktails and mixed drinks, are absolutely inflammatory. Other drinks like beer and wine that have higher sugar content can also be inflammatory. However, in studies, there is what they call a J curve effect. And so, what the studies have shown is that no alcohol showed inflammation. People that had moderate amounts of alcohol actually had lower inflammation. And then those that had higher amounts of alcohol had high inflammation as well. Now, there are conditions where alcohol will make that condition worse or push your body to develop certain conditions. And if that's the case, you should absolutely avoid it. But if you do opt to drink per these guidelines, stick with dry red wines and non sugar liquor mixed with sugar free seltzer water. Okay, so a lot of people ask if the Mediterranean diet is considered the blueprint, are there other diets that are considered anti inflammatory as well? So, first of all, just know that an anti inflammatory diet is truly unique to you. This means that even if you start out with the Mediterranean diet as your blueprint, you may subtract even more things from it. An example would be a gluten free version, which is what we promote at TrueWell. because studies have shown that gluten can be inflammatory in the gut, even for people without celiac or gluten sensitivity. Other options for anti inflammatory diets are paleo, pescatarian, plant based, vegan, and even keto can be anti inflammatory if the guidelines are followed that we already covered. Personalization part comes when you determine what framework or even hybrid of frameworks will be best for your body based on what condition you may be trying to manage or prevent, and also what foods you may be allergic to or sensitive to. So, for example, if you have a GI condition where grains or even beans and legumes are irritating to you, then the paleo diet may be a really good framework for you to follow because it eliminates those things. But you may also be allergic to coconut, which is a staple in the paleo diet. So you would eat then paleo diet minus the coconut. So, like I said before, I don't support restricting like that right off the bat. My approach is starting on this Mediterranean framework, using an elimination period for specific foods to see what you can tolerate and what you can't, and what foods may be driving inflammation for you specifically, and then figuring out a framework from there. So many people ask, well, what can I expect when I start on an anti inflammatory diet? Like, what am I going to feel? What kind of changes are going to happen? So, first and foremost, if you have had a really sugar heavy, carb heavy, and junk heavy diet, unless you slowly come off that, you could experience what some people call keto flu. And basically, it is your body fighting with you because it doesn't have the same energy sources that it had before. You're moving into whole foods. So you don't have those simple carbs that dissolve so quickly in the bloodstream. Now, the other thing that you can expect is some differences in digestion. And that can be a good thing because if your digestion is now running, it's not being sluggish anymore, you're working on your gut health, you're working on increasing your fiber and resistant starches, some positive things are going to happen. But you may have a few days or even weeks with some GI changes. Overall, though, you can expect some pretty big changes and positive outcomes within 2 to 3 weeks and a really large difference within about 12 weeks. But it is like anything else. Any new thing that you start, you're going to have to learn how to stick it out and stay in it so that you can see those maximum benefits of consistency in the long run. So if you are ready to get started on an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle, we have a free quick start guide. If you'd like to grab that, then check out the description below. And we also have a whole playlist on everything anti-inflammatory diet. So I'm into that as well as exploring the True Well channel. Be true, be well, and I'll see you in the next video.